So, the Type 18C hand and a half sword has become very popular among backyard cutters and sword enthusiasts in general. And that's because they perform extremely well and they're very imposing to the eye. Now, I have had two examples of this type of sword before, and this new one by Balaur Arms, or at least it's new to me, is a little bit different than the others. And I don't mean in a bad way. Let's check it out. Hello everyone, thank you so much for coming back to my channel. My name is Mike. As always, it's greatly appreciated that you take some of your free time out to come listen to me talk about swords. So today we're going to be taking a look at this sword right here. This is the Type 18C Alexandria sword by Balaur Arms. Now, Balaur Arms is Cult of Athena's exclusive brand, and they teamed up with Kane Shen to produce this design for them. And finally I got my hands on one. I tried earlier this year to get my hands on one. They were sold out, and then this one popped up in stock and I hopped on it right away, clicked buy it now, or I should say add to cart, and yeah, I was able to get it, and then right after that they sold out again. So this is a very popular sword. I believe at the time that I'm making this video it is still sold out, but they're doing them in batches, and Kane Shen is in China. Fantastic sword maker, but you know, it's in China. It's going to take a while for it to come back into stock. So if you like what you see here, just wait, be patient, get on the wait list, and you should be able to get one. Now, the Type 18 medieval sword profile happens to be my favorite when it comes to medieval sword designs. It's a fascination, or I should say a love, that goes all the way back to when I was a child and I saw Sword in the Stone, that very classic Disney movie. It's an old movie, but in that film, or in that movie, the sword is depicted as kind of having, or pretty much having, a Type 18 blade. And the day I saw that, I thought to myself, yes, that is what a medieval sword should look like. And then that stuck with me all the way up into my grown-up years. Of course, I learned about the different types that are out there, but even to this day, the Type 18 is still my favorite sword type. Now, within the Type 18 category of swords, there's subsets, and we have the Type 18, the 18A, the 18B, and the 18C. Now, the 18C is pretty unique because it's usually instantly recognizable by having the very, very broad cutting blade. Now, also interesting to note is there aren't many historical examples that have survived, and that is because it is believed that there weren't many made. The 18C, this really wide, broad type of 18, they're all said to have been associated, or at least linked to, if not all part of, one group of swords that was produced sometime at the end of the 14th century or beginning of the 15th century, and acquired by the Sultan or Mamluk Sultan of Egypt. Now, he is said to have donated them all to the Alexandria arsenal in Egypt, and a lot of the blades, I don't know if all of them do, but a lot of them bear an inscription that has the date of 1419 and then actually says on it, donated by the Sultan to the arsenal. Now, of course, over the last few hundred years, they've sort of dispersed throughout the world, and I have a picture here that shows at least 4 of them, and it's suspected that there was probably about 20 of these Type Cs. But in this picture you can see 4 examples, and also shown in this picture is what we believe to be the Harriet Dean sword and the Bashford Dean sword, which were 2 swords that were acquired by Bashford Dean, one of which, the Harriet Dean sword, he gave to his daughter at the time that he at the time he died, it was willed to his daughter, and then that sword disappeared, and it recently showed up at an auction. And I read an article about it, and that was actually the first time that I was exposed to the Type 18C blade profile. And I thought, wow, that's actually pretty amazing because it really is a very imposing and interesting sword. Now, like many people, I went out and searched out a reproduction of that sword, and the first one I got was the Ronin Katana Medieval War Sword. I can't remember which number it is because they have a numbering system for them, but I got that one, and then not too long after that, I got the DSA, or Dark Sword Armory Alexandria sword. So I've had experience with two different versions of the Alexandria sword, and this would be my third here. Now, shout out to Mr. Kane Shen. So if you guys don't know Kane, he's got a fantastic YouTube channel. The guy's extremely knowledgeable when it comes to swords. He's got a great collection. He does awesome informative videos. Check out his channel, guys. I'm going to put a link down in the description below to his channel so you guys can go and check out some really awesome sword content. But Mr. Kane Shen left a comment down in the previous video that I made where he saw this particular sword up here on the wall, and said he was interested in seeing my thoughts and opinions on it. So I didn't plan on actually doing a review of this sword next, but thanks to Mr. Kane Shen, I said, you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and do it. So shout out to you, Kane. Thank you so much, buddy. Yeah, without further ado, let's get into the review of this really cool sword, and I'll tell you what I think about it. Okay, so let's start here at the pommel. So what we have here is a pretty classic wheel pommel, and this actually looks very similar to what you find on the Harriet Dean sword, which, by the way, is displayed at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, along with the twin sword, the Bashford Dean sword. So, and I also think that there is a Type 18C from the Alexandria collection kept at the Royal Armories in Leeds, as well as I know that there's another example kept in Philadelphia there's a museum in Philadelphia that has one as well. But anyway, so they all usually have this wheel pommel here, and yeah, it's a pretty classic wheel pommel. This one here is made out of a cast stainless steel, and as you can see, there is a peen block. I don't have a problem with stainless steel for a material. Of course, it's easier to maintain. However, I like the look of like a mild carbon steel. It just looks a little bit more age appropriate, where stainless steel tends to have a little bit of a more bright modern aesthetic, but it's really not that big of a deal. And you can see there the casting lines and everything are actually pretty good. It's not perfect. There's a little bit of asymmetry in there and stuff, but it's really not that big of a deal. I would say overall it's a pretty clean casting. There's really no sharp ledges or anything like that. And you can see there's some texture there in the center. I suppose if you wanted to, I know people are kind of into, like, you could get a coin of some sort and, either glue it in there or, secure it in there somehow. That's, I guess, always an option. And then, sorry guys, excuse me. You can see the peen there. It's not the cleanest peen that I've ever seen, but it's good enough. There's no sharp points on it or anything. And yeah, relatively speaking, I would say that this pommel is pretty well done. Originally, I thought that it might be too big for this sword, but after handling it and viewing the sword in different environments and stuff, different lightings, it is actually pretty good for it. It might be just a tad too big, but it's fine. Yeah, overall, no complaints here with the pommel. I actually think it's pretty good. Now, some people, I think, like to grip this sword, either overlapping the pommel or actually grip the pommel. I don't actually do that with my medieval swords. I tend to, clear the pommel pretty good. And, with this grip, which we're going to talk about, it's not a problem at all. So I know people complain about wheel pommels digging into their palm, but I don't really have that problem. So I'm pretty pleased with the pommel. Moving on to the grip. I'm just going to remove the sword from the scabbard here for a second. So moving on to this grip. What we have here is a red leather, and it has been bound in cord and sort of lacquered a little bit, just like they do on high-end swords. And I have to say, although it's not as clean as sort of a high-end sword, it is done pretty well. And I was surprised to see this good grip, cord-bounded leather grip on a sword in this particular price range. And I don't think I've mentioned the price of this sword yet. I think it's $488 on Cult of Athena's website. Don't quote me on that, go check. I think prices can fluctuate, but I believe it's $488 new. So in that price range, which is, I would say, mid-range, even towards the lower end of mid-range, I would say. I don't know, maybe it's just mid-range. This type of grip is actually pretty good. You don't normally see this, and the shaping is very, very good. Now, there's not a whole lot of wasting on here, but you get these nice risers, I think, which do a very good job at securing your grip. But it's also pretty thin, and it's got that nice oval shape. And what I found is it is extremely comfortable to grip. I mean, this, in terms of some of the medieval swords that I've owned in my collection and used, this has probably one of the best, most comfortable grips I've seen. So, and handled, it's actually very well done. Now, also, the length is very, very good. These Alexandria Type 18Cs were known for having kind of short grips, and that's one major difference between this one here and the Dark Sword Armory version of the Alexandria sword, is that one had a much longer grip. And at first I thought it was kind of like a stylistic choice of Dark Sword Armory, and I believe the owner of Dark Sword, in an interview he did with someone, it might have been Matthew Jensen, said he had purposely chose the grip to be that long, but I kind of have a feeling that it had to do with offsetting the extra weight of that blade. But that, you can find my review of the Dark Sword Alexandria sword in the library down below. But anyway, very, very nice grip here, guys. You can see the seam there. It's done very, very nicely. You can't really feel it or anything like that. It's a very good grip. Moving on to the crossguard, I love this crossguard. The shape and the design they got they're just really, really well done. It looks a lot like the original and some of the other Alexandria Type 18Cs that I've seen. It also is very, very period accurate in terms of its proportions and whatnot. This type of crossguard, so we get it in frame, this type of crossguard was pretty common in the 15th century, and so they just really did a great job on executing on this crossguard. It's got some dimension. It's not just a flat, straight piece of steel, and it is stainless steel also. Now, you can see that there is a pretty considerable gap in the crossguard. That doesn't really bother me all that much. I know it is something that, us collectors and enthusiasts really look at. We like to see precision fit crossguards, and we like to see perfection. However, I do think that after having seen many historical originals, that is accurate. I mean, some were very tightly had no gaps, some had big gaps, some had medium gaps. It's just one of those things that in a day of modern day production, we like to see perfection, but this is good enough for me, and yeah, I don't see any problem with it. Another thing to note about this crossguard is apparently the way it's constructed and mounted here is that this guard is force fit onto the tang, and the shoulders of the sword here sit down on a ledge, and then that's how it sits, and then the grip is put on. It's not held there by compression of the grip. So it's a much sturdier construction method. It's one of the ways that higher end sword makers do it, and there's no movement. Everything on here is as tight as can be, solid, and yeah, it's very, very good. So, so far, the hilt portion of this sword is really fantastic for the money. You know, like I said, there's some asymmetry, there's some imperfections. You can see there's some like markings here, and then the leather grip itself has this. They didn't actually do a very clean wrap job here. You can see the back side of the leather there. So, you know, it's not as clean and nice as a high-end sword like an Albion or a Lockwood or something like that. But, you know, once again, this is a sub $500 sword, so for me, there's no problem there. Now we're going to move on to one of the most interesting parts of this sword, or any sword for that matter, and I'm trying to back up here to get this in frame, but the blade. Now this is what we would classify as a Type 18C blade. You know, you got the very, very wide base, and you know, it stays pretty wide for a while, and then it tapers to a more acute point so that you can do thrusting. Now the 18C is known to be a cutter, and based on the sword design and the blade profile, you can see that yes, it's optimized for cutting. However, this version of the sword is a little bit different than some of the other two that I've seen, and in fact, it doesn't really have the same profile as the original Alexandria swords do, and that is because it does. You know, it's super broad here down at the end, or I should say the base, but you can see it tapers pretty drastically as it goes towards the tip. Now, the historical examples of the 18C and the Alexandria sword, they tend to stay rather broad as they make their way to the tip. So this has sort of a unique profile taper, and one that I have not seen in a reproduction of this type of sword. So while it clearly bears the profile of an 18C, this actually has a much more unique blade profile. Now, it is super thin, and that is also historically accurate. There's a really good video out there of a gentleman who's handling the Harriet Dean sword or the Bashford Dean sword, I can't remember which one, and they're like flexing it and moving it around and making it do, you know, its floppy thing. And that sword is very, very thin. It's basically the same thinness as this here, and it has the same amount of flex. So in terms of thinness and flexibility, this is how a lot of these were. Now, I don't know if every single one was like that, but at least the Harriet Dean one is like that, and they are known to be super thin and very, very flexible. Now, this one has a very nice hollow grind, and I'm trying to see if you guys can see it there, or get you guys to see it. The blade has a beautiful hollow grind, and hopefully the camera is picking it up, but yeah, it is just really nicely done, which gives it a really fine, sharp edge. The blade itself is already thin, and then you have this beautiful hollow grind, and this sword came extremely sharp. I didn't do anything to it, and you know, spoiler alert, it is a beastly cutter. And that was actually quite surprising to me, because unlike the others, like I said, it doesn't stay as broad up here in the cutting portion as, you know, a typical, you know, reproduction of an Alexandria sword. I would argue that it, you know, it's kind of a mistake to call this an Alexandria, because it really doesn't have the same blade profile. Now, I didn't think it was going to cut as well because it didn't have as much mass up here in the foible, but I was actually very wrong, and you're going to see that in the cutting footage in a minute. So yeah, very unique take, I think, on the Type 18C, and I'm very glad that I actually got one of these and was able to, you know, test it out and swing it around and do some really nice or fun cutting. Let's take a look at the cutting that I did, and when we come back, I'll show you guys, or at least give you guys my opinion of how I think the sword handles and performs. And we'll talk about the scabbard for a minute, and then I'll give you guys my final opinion and tell you guys if I think that this sword is worth your money. So let's take a look at the cutting. Okay, my friends, now that you've seen me cut with the sword and use it, I can give you guys my opinions on the handling characteristics and how it cuts, and whether or not I think it's worth your money to go out and get one of these things. Now, what I can say about handling is that it handles amazingly well. The balance in the sword, the nimbleness, the ability to, you know, quickly change positions and guard positions and accelerate into cuts is just really, really good. You have an amazing amount of control with this sword, even in one hand. I mean, you can control the tip with very little effort. And so what I think we have going on here is, you know, this doesn't, I've already mentioned previously that this doesn't have the profile taper that is typical of an 18C. And I really do think that is adding to the nimbleness of this sword, because it has less mass up here, but a lot of the mass is situated here. So if you can think of this sword, and bear with me here, as if there were a bar running through the center of the sword right here, and then it was suspended on that bar, and there was a ball joint here. That's kind of what the sword feels like when you're handling it. You know, like it's on a ball joint, and you can just move it in place easily with very little effort. And that's really the best way I can describe handling this thing. And it's just so easy to maneuver and use. And for its weight, the sword weighs in at 3 pounds, 2.5 ounces. So, it's, I would say, I don't know, maybe average for the weight of a well-balanced 1.5 sword. But I have a sword that weighs well under 3 pounds that is roughly the same length, and it's a 1.5 sword, or two-handed sword, no, 1.5 sword, and it feels a lot heavier than this. And so, that's because this particular blade profile with this very wide base, very, very thin blade with really good distal taper is creating an experience that is quite amazing when it comes to handling dynamics and characteristics. Now, as far as how it cuts, it's like a laser cutting through stuff. It's like very little effort to cut through the targets that I like to cut through, which is tatami and the thicker soda bottles, and both of which can be very challenging to cut if your sword is not up to the task and you're not up to the task. This sword makes it seem a lot easier, and I was shocked by it. Now, you may be like, well, Mike, why were you shocked by it? I thought 18Cs are known to be like lawnmowers. And they are. However, this one here, with lacking the type, or I should say the amount of mass in this area, the cutting portion that a typical 18C has, I just didn't think it was going to pass through the targets or cut as well as it should, or that is typically associated with these types of swords. I thought I was going to have to provide a lot more power to do it, and so the first cuts that I did were way overpowered, and I don't think they were shown in the cut footage, but they were way overpowered. I mean, this thing glides through tatami and bottles like it's probably one of the best cutters I've ever used. And so what it did is it got me reflecting and thinking on what do we have going on here? What is making this such a great cutter? Because like I said, it shocked me. I just didn't think it was going to be able to perform as well. And this was before I saw anybody else's cutting footage on YouTube, because I know Scabbard did a video and a couple other people, which all showed that the sword is a very good cutter. And I hadn't seen any of that yet. And so, I was purposefully withholding so that I could, form my own opinion of it. But it cuts extremely well, and I love it. I love cutting with it. It's very, very enjoyable because, in a way, it makes you feel like you're a better cutter than you are. However, what it did, right, is it made me ask some questions, and this was a great intellectual exercise for me, and that is like, a lot of times you cut with a sword and it doesn't perform well, and you try to consider the reasons why it's not cutting. So you look at the edge sharpness, right? You look at how thick the blade is. You look at the edge geometry. You try to figure out, is it too heavy? Are you not moving it fast enough? Are you not moving it correctly? Do you not have good technique? There's just all these things that you consider on why the sword isn't cutting. In this case, I had to consider, why is it cutting? It was a weird experience, but a very fun one. And I've chalked it up to a few things, and I'm going to tell you about them right now. For one, it's sharp. Okay, that one's obvious. It has a very sharp edge, and it's very nicely done. It's very even, it's sharp everywhere, but especially in the cutting portion of the blade, it's sharp, and that makes a difference. Now, also, it is a thin blade, so you got sharpness, and it's thin. How does the thickness make a difference? Well, it's less material that needs to be forced through a target. So you got sharp, you got thin, and edge geometry, or I should say blade geometry in the bevel, it's hollow ground. So it's even got less material behind the edge than, a standard flat grind would have. So, you got thinness, you got sharpness, you got hollow ground, edge beveling, and here's the kicker, or I should say here's another thing. I had said that it lacks width over here as compared to 18Cs, other 18Cs. Now, while that is true, it also allows you to build a lot of blade speed in your cuts. I mean, it's very easy to do. So the fact that you can build up really good blade speed, that the edge is very sharp, that the geometry behind the edge is hollow ground and is very, very good, and the blade itself is very thin, well, you have all the things, or pretty much all the key things that you need to cut very, very well, and this proved it. And yeah, it was an absolute blast to cut with. I wish I had more tatami to use, and of course tatami is really expensive, so I could only really use a couple of mats because I wanted to reserve some for other reviews and other weekend cutting that I like to do. But yeah, it cuts extremely well. Now, interesting to note too, I was cutting, back up a little bit, I was cutting with like this portion of the blade right here. Actually, I'm sorry, that portion of the blade right there. That's where I was making most of my cuts. I just kind of felt like that's where it needed to be. I would say that if you would have come down just a little bit and cut with this portion of the blade, it would cut even better, which is crazy because it was cutting amazingly well for me using this portion. So using this as your sort of center of percussion, or where the blade node is like that's the area that if you were to cut down here, it would even be more effective, which is kind of scary because it's pretty effective as is. You could probably even deliver significant cuts, up towards the tip. Now, this is cool because I have known that you don't necessarily need a wide blade to have a good cutting blade. Many sabers are not wide, but have really good edge geometry and sharp, and are very nimble and quick, so they cut very well. However, I do prefer a little bit more mass up here for this type of sword. Now, and I'm going to get into that in my final opinion. So, to wrap up the handling characteristics and the cutting, this thing is awesome. And I think if you are into backyard cutting and you just want to get out and seem like you're better at cutting than you really are, I think this is a great option for that. And plus, it's fun. It's a very fun sword to use, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. Now, real quick, I want to talk about how comfortable the grip is. I'm not gonna spend too much time on it. Very comfortable, very easy to index. I had no problem with it. Like I said, I don't grab on the pommel or overlap the pommel, so I found no issues with the grip. In fact, I thought it was very, very good in cutting and handling. It's easy to index and very comfortable. So that's pretty much it for that. And yeah, so let's move on to my final opinion. Oh, actually, I do this almost in every video where I forget about the Scabbard. The Scabbard. Not too much to talk about here, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. You do get a wood core Scabbard with the sword, and you can see there's the wood. You get this rain flap. It's a rather lackluster Scabbard, but for me it's fine. I don't really put too much emphasis on a sword's Scabbard. Some companies make really great Scabbards, like Valiant Armory, and there's some other stuff by I think Stephen Lockwood, and those Scabbards are beautiful. This really is, for me, it's just a storage container for the sword, so I don't know, there's really not too much to say. It's got red leather that matches the grip of the sword. It is stitched, and you get this stainless steel shape, which is okay. Not so impressed with this, but it's fine for the price of the sword. It's cool that you get a wood core scabbard. And yeah, as far as how the sword fits in the scabbard, because I know that's important to some people, it fits. It's just, you know, there is quite a bit of rattle. It is a loose fit, and if you do turn it upside down, the sword is going to come out. So it's not fit particularly well, or well at all, to the scabbard. But once again, for me, that's not an issue. I don't wear the sword around. I don't wear it on a costume or a get-up or anything like that. I basically use it to store the blade, to keep it safe from my children. It is stored up on a wall, so like, you know, they can't get to it, but just to keep it safe from damage and, you know, all that. Okay, my friends, let's wrap this video up with my final opinion on this sword and whether or not I think it's worth a purchase for you. This Type 18C Alexandria sword by Balaur Arms is definitely a compelling offering on the market right now. If you're in the market for a really good backyard cutting sword, or something that's very nimble and fast, and like I said, can cut very, very well, this is a very good offering. I think you would be very, very happy with this. The construction quality is great. The blade geometry, the distal taper, the sharpness, a lot of the things that you need for excellent cutting are here. And yeah, it's very, very good. I like the grip. It's comfortable. It's easy to use. It's easy to index. It's a very good sword. Now, it's a little rough around the edges in terms of fit and finish. It's not really a big deal. Like I said, this is a sub $500 sword, so you know, you're not going to get Albion quality fit and finish, but you know, you would expect that for this money, and it's very good. Now, as far as its adherence to representing a Type 18C sword from the Alexandria swords, I don't think it does a good job at that, because it has a very unique blade profile. I think it's more accurate to say that this is an interpretation of an 18C, but I wouldn't classify it as a Type 18C Alexandria. Those swords are very unique in their blade profile, and this does not match it really at all. This is really its own thing. Now, does that matter? Not really. I mean, and also, does it matter if you classify this as an 18C or not? Not really. I mean, it is a Type 18, and we can probably just leave it at that. And it's a really cool one, and I like it very much. Now, will I be keeping this? Probably not. I'll probably end up selling it. And the reason is, one, I don't have a ton of money, so I don't keep everything. And I only really keep the things that I absolutely love. So what is this sword lacking for me? It's lacking the broadness up here in the cutting portion of the blade. Now, like I said before, this thing performs extremely well, and its cutting ability is amazing. But for a sword like this, for me, what I like is more mass up here to be a more powerful cutter. Although it's very, very nimble and quick and fast, I'm not necessarily sure for me that's what I was looking for here. I should have known better based on the blade profile. I mean, I could see in the pictures that it had a much more narrow profile. It's not to say that I'm displeased with it. This is an amazing sword. In fact, I wish I could keep it, but like I said, I kind of want to sell it off and put that money towards another sword that I'm trying to purchase. So that being said, this is a great sword, guys. I think you'd be very happy to pick it up. Just know that if you're looking for something that matches an Alexandria Type 18C, this is not really going to be good for that. But if you're looking for a sword that is a beastly cutter, that is really fun, that is well made, that looks really, really cool, and is a unique interpretation of an 18C, which really doesn't exist on the market. I couldn't find a Type 18C that has this blade profile. There's some Type 15s out there that are very similar, and I would say that this blade profile shares more in common with a Type 15 than a Type 18C. But, you know, typology, you know, we don't have to spend too much time on that. It is what it is. So, fantastic sword, guys. Highly recommended. Check it out. You know, I think you'd be very happy if you get your hands on one. So, till next time, thank you so much for coming by. I hope this video helped you decide whether or not you're going to buy one of these. And yeah, that's the whole purpose of this channel, is just to put information out there for people. So, thanks a lot, guys. Greatly appreciated. Have a great day. Talk to you soon.